Okay, you guys, this is going to be identifying attributes from standard form. For the remote learners, this is going to be on page 20 in your notebook. So it's not going to be something that we're doing in Desmos, except for the calculator piece. It's all going to be in your notebook. So yesterday or the other day, we talked about finding attributes from our equations, which was pretty nice because they were in slope-intercept form. So all you had to do was identify your slope, which was next to your x, and then you identified your y-intercept, and you just had to graph it. However, we're going to be doing it from standard form today. So let me go ahead and write the steps first. So your first step is you're going to have to convert to slope-intercept form. Second step, you're going to have to identify the m, or the slope, and the b, which is our y-intercept. And then third step is you're going to graph it. And then if you're using RTI Inspire, you do menu. Oh, that's a bad menu, sorry. Trace, and then graph trace. Now, because I'm using the Desmos calculator over here, it's going to look a little bit different, but you'll still get the same content. And again, you do that so that you can find the zero. Okay, and another name for our zeros are rocks. All right, let's take a look at number one. Number one, we have 2x plus y equals 3. 2x plus y equals 3. So we can't just look at this equation right here and say, okay, well, I know what the slope is, because it's not in slope-intercept form. So again, our goal is to get this y all by itself. So in order to do that, we're going to have to subtract our 2x over here. And what we do to one side, we're going to have to do to the other. Now, I can't add that 2x to that 3 because that 3 doesn't have an x. So I'm going to go ahead and make this my 0 pair. And I'm going to bring down my y, which is all by itself. Make sure you switch your 2x and your plus 3 so that it looks like y equals mx plus b. Again, y equals mx plus b. So our m is going to be that -2, and our b is going to be that +3. So I'm going to rewrite all of that, and I'll show you how we're going to write that. So we got our m equals -2, and then we have our b, which equals 3. Now I'm going to write b as a coordinate. So I have over 0 up 3. So let's go over here to our Desmos calculator and let's try and write the same thing. So we have y equals -2x plus 3. All right, there we go. Boom shakalaka. We got our points. And you can come over here and you can click on that y-intercept and see that point right there, over 0 up 3. Awesome. So now the next attribute that we're going to need to find is going to be our 0. Okay, so I'm going to write that over here, 0. And again, we showed you guys how to do your 0 on the other video, but let's just take a look at it on our graph. So I'm going to click on that x-intercept right there, and look, it writes it as 1.5, 0. Okay, so that's awesome. So you're going to be seeing this as a point, but you also might see it like this. It might be asking for what is the root? Okay, and now the root is just going to be some number, and again, it's using our x-intercept, so our root is 1.5. Okay. All right, and that is the 3 attributes that you're going to need to find. Okay. Again, you can look at your calculator to verify those attributes. But you can also look at your equation. But again, you have to convert it from standard form to slope-intercept form in order for you to figure this out. Okay, number 2. We have 4x plus 5y equals -30. Again, we're getting our x or our y by itself, so we're going to make sure that we get this all by itself first. So we've got to subtract that 4x, and then what we do to one side, we're going to have to do to the other. So I'm going to subtract 4x over here, This becomes a 0 pair, and we're left with 5y equals negative 4x minus 30. Last step is going to be to divide by 5. So I'm going to divide by 5 here, and divide by 5 here, and divide by 5 here. So we're left with this guy becoming a 1. We have our y equals negative 4 divided by 5x, because that cannot simplify. Hold on, sorry. Back in bed, please. Back in bed. Sorry, y'all. Trying to get a 3-year-old to take a nap. We have negative 30 divided by 5, which is going to be negative 6. So let's go ahead and let's graph that. We have y equals negative 4 divided by 5. Make sure you go over to the side. X minus 6. Now, it's hard to see it on here, so you might have to zoom out on your graph. Okay. Sorry, child's crying. Sorry. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at those different attributes. So we've got our slope, which is our m, which is going to be our negative 4/5. Okay, we have our y-intercept, which is our b. You'll see it written as a coordinate, 0, negative 6. And then now we have to find our 0. Okay, so we got our 0. I'm going to come over here to my graph, and I'm going to click on it so we can see what the 0 looks like. So it's going to be negative 7.5, 0. So now think about it for a second. What would be another way we could write that? So you might be able to write this, okay, as a solution. So if you're writing it as a solution, you're going to see the word solution. And then we're going to write it as x equals whatever our x value was, so negative 7.5. So that's another way that you might see it written. Okay, let's do another one. Number 3. We have x minus 3y equals 12. Okay, so to get our y all by itself, we're going to subtract our x first. So bye, see you later. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So I'll subtract x over here. So you're left with negative 3y equals, switch them, negative x plus 12. If you don't bring that negative with you, you'll end up getting it wrong. The next step is to divide by our negative 3 on both sides. So whatever number is in front of that y, that's what you divide by. If you don't divide by that negative, you're going to end up getting it wrong. So this becomes a 1, and we're left with y equals. Now, here's where it gets tricky. There's a number in front of that x that we know is there, but we don't see. Okay, it's that ninja 1. So you have to make sure that you remember that ninja 1 right there. So we have our negative 1 divided by negative 3 is going to give us a positive 1/3 x. And then our positive 12 divided by negative 3 is going to give you a negative 4. So identifying those attributes from our equation, we have 1/3 is our slope, and then we have our y-intercept, our b, which is going to be 0, negative 4. So let's write that. Let's go ahead and graph that. So we have y equals 1/3 x minus 4. Okay, and you can see that graphed right there. So we've got our y-intercept. Boom, it's still right there. So now we just need our x-intercept. Oops, sorry, I'm going to move my graph over. And we have it right there, which is our 0, which is 12, 0. Now, another way you might see this written is our function notation. So if I was doing function notation, remember your x is this guy, and then your outside number is your y. So if our x is our 12, we'll put our 12 inside, and then we have our y, which is the outside, so we'll put that guy right there. So this is what it would look like if we were using it with function notation. Okay. All right, let's do another one. Number 4. Again, lots of practice with converting from standard form to slope-intercept form. So we have x minus y equals negative 8. We subtract that x from this side, so it becomes a 0 pair. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other. We bring down our negative y, and then we switch the two sides over here. So negative x minus 8. Then, because there's a negative in front of that y, we can't have a negative y. We want to make sure it's positive, so we're going to have to divide by that negative 1. Okay, what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So essentially, if I switch that negative sign over on the y and make it a positive, then I'm going to be doing the same thing to everything else. So a negative 1 divided by a negative 1, because you have that ninja 1, is going to become a positive 1x. And a negative 8 divided by a negative 1 is going to become a positive 8. So we can graph that now. Y equals 1x, or you can just put x, it doesn't matter, plus 8. So now we've got this guy over here. We have our m, which is 1. We have our b, which is 8, or 0, 8. Again, because it's a y-intercept, the x is 0. And now looking at our graph, we're going to come over here and we're going to find that x-intercept. So where it crosses the x-axis, boom, right here. And then it tells us that our 0, is negative 8, 0. All right, we've got a couple more. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 4 more for you, and so I'll go ahead and do those with you. Our next one is number 5. We have 4x minus y equals 0. 4x minus y equals 0. So we subtract our 4x from both sides. And so we're left with that becoming a 0 pair, and negative y equals negative 4x plus 0. Now, this one's a strange one because normally you wouldn't see this plus 0 right here, okay, because it's just 0. But let's go ahead and let's finish solving this out so that we have that positive y. So I'm going to divide by a negative 1 because there's a ninja 1 right there, and divide by negative 1 here and negative 1 here. So that becomes a positive y equals a negative 4 divided by a negative 1 is a positive 4x, and 0 divided by any number is still 0. So let's graph this. Y equals 4x plus 0. Now again, you don't have to write that plus 0, okay? It's just going to come over here and it's going to show you that it's that 0 right there. Now, here's the tricky part. If you notice, this is our y-intercept, right? We have our slope, which is 4, and our y-intercept, which is 0, or also 0, 0. But what would be the x-intercept of it? The x-intercept is going to actually be the same as the y-intercept. And that's okay. That's possible. You can have an x-intercept that's the same as the y-intercept. So our x-intercept is 0, 0. If you're writing it in this form, if I asked you for the root, then you'd be writing just the number 0. All right, so just a little bit of a different one. Let's take a look. I'm going to do number 6. Hold on, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, a little kind of big. Again, that's another reason why I love Notability, right? All right, number 6. 3x minus 2y equals negative 14. We'll subtract 3x from this side. So we're left with negative 2y equals negative 3x minus 14. So again, make sure you're switching those. We divide by negative 2 on both sides. That becomes a 1. You're left with y equals positive 3 halves x plus 7. Make sure you simplify that and you make sure it can be simplified. Your slope is 3 halves. Your y-intercept is 7, so 0, 7. So let's find that x-intercept by plugging this in. Y equals 3 halves x plus 7. All right, here's our y-intercept right there, 0, 7, and here's our x-intercept. Now notice, this is a different number. It's kind of like giving you a decimal. And that's okay, you can still write it. 0 is negative 4.67. I'm going to just round to the nearest hundredths, 0. If we were writing this as a solution, then it would be x equals negative 4.67. All right, next one. Number 7. X plus 5y equals negative 15. Subtract x from both sides. That becomes a 0 pair. So again, this is what we want to see when you show your work. 5y equals negative x minus 15. We divide by 5 on both sides. That becomes a 1, so we're left with y equals. Now, I know that there's not a number right there in front of that x, but there actually is. He's just hiding. So that's a negative 1 divided by 5, and we got our x. And again, negative 15 divided by 5 is going to give us a negative 3, so we can graph that now. Y equals negative 1/5 x minus 3. Here's our y-intercept. If you notice, it says 0, negative 3, which is what we have over here. And then we've got our slope from our equation, negative 1/5. And then now we got to find our 0, which is another form. It's like our rocks. So we come over here, and there it is, negative 15, 0. And again, we'll write that as a coordinate. Now, another thing you might see it written is function notation. So something equals something. Again, here's our input, and then here's going to be our output. So this guy is also our input is our x, and our output is our y. So x and y. So you'll see it written as negative 15, 0. Okay, last one that I'm going to do with you guys is number 8. And we have negative 6x plus 4y equals 20. Now, this one's a little bit different because that x value, or that x term, is negative. Now, normally in standard form, they'll be positive, but I just wanted to give you just a different one. So we have taking the opposite, so we're going to add 6x to both sides. And so we end up with 4y equals 6x plus 20. We divide by 4 on both sides. So we end up with y equals, now here's where you have to change this. This needs to be simplified. You can use your calculator to do that, but it's going to simplify to 3/2 x plus 20 divided by 4, which is 5. Let's graph that. So we have y equals 3 divided by 2. Ooh, sorry, that was terrible. Y equals 3 divided by 2 x plus 5. Okay, zooming out just a little bit so we can see it better. Okay, and then we've got our y-intercept right here at 0, 5. So our slope is 3/2, and our y-intercept is 0, 5. And now we need to find what our 0 is, or sorry, our y-intercept, not our 0. And so we're going to click on this guy right here. And again, it's going to give you negative 3.33, 0. Again, also known as your root, which is negative 3.33. We've got our 0. We've got our x-intercept. There's another way you're going to see it written. And again, as a point. And then you have a solution. So it'll be written x equals negative 3.33. So again, those are all the different ways that you're going to see this written. And for your assignment today, it's going to require you to practice that. So let me go ahead and let me show you what that'll look like. Wait for it. Here we go. So taking a look at number 1, this is what your assignment's going to be like. Okay, you have trying to get y by itself. So we're going to start by subtracting that 3x over here and subtracting it over here on the other side. So you end up with a 0 pair here. You have your 4y equals, switch them, negative 3x plus 8. Got to get y by itself, so we divide by 4 on both sides. And then we simplify. So y equals negative 3/4 x, because it doesn't simplify. And then 8 divided by 4 is going to be 2. So then we come over here, writing it in slope-intercept form. You're going to just rewrite this. Y equals negative 3/4 x plus 2. Now, if you want, you can copy and paste. That's not going to bother me. All right, so coming over here, our b is going to be 2. Our m is our slope, so that's -3/4. And then we want you to write the y-intercept as a point. So it's going to be over 0, 2. You can verify this in your calculator by saying y equals -3 divided by 4 x plus 2. And so here's our y-intercept. It shows you that coordinate over there. So then the last step is going to be finding all of your x-intercepts and how they're written. So our x-intercept is right here. Okay, it's written as a decimal, and that's totally okay. So it says root, so it's written as a number. So you're going to write it as 2.67, so round to the nearest tenth. Writing your 0 as a function notation. So we're going to write in this, we've got f of 2.67 is equal to 0. Your x-intercept written as a point, 2.67, 0. And then your solution is x equals 2.67. So again, these are all of the different ways that you're going to see it written. And so we want you to have lots of practice with that. So please make sure you're filling in all of your different spaces. Let's do one more together. Subtracting 10x from this side. So we end up with a 0 pair. 3y equals -10x plus 2. Divide by 3 on both sides. That becomes a 1, so you're left with y equals -10/3 because you can't simplify that, plus 2/3. Eek, that looks yucky. If you want to, you can take this guy and move him over here. I'm going to make him smaller, sorry. Move him over here. But I definitely want to make sure that you show your work for this guy right here, as well as putting it right there. So make sure you do that for each one of your problems. Let's go ahead and let's graph this. So we have our y equals -10 divided by 3 x plus 2 divided by 3. Someone's going to probably have a little bit, some decimals in here. All right, so we're coming over here. We have our y-intercept, which is that guy right there. So you can write it as 2/3. Your slope is -10/3. And your y-intercept, you can again write it as 0.67. Let's do our x-intercept. Your x-intercept is 0.2, 0. So we can come over here and write that for this one. Right? And then, since we're just looking at our x value, that's what we're going to put for other ones. So our root is just a number, so 0.2. Function notation, we plug in our x for this one, equals our y. So we got our input and then our output. And then we have our solution, which is x equals 0.2. So I'm going to highlight where you should be putting all of these. So those are all of the different forms that you're going to be writing. Same thing for this guy over here. Here's the x-intercept. Boom, boom, and boom. Okay. And again, make sure you're showing me your 0 pairs for each of them. You're showing me that you put it over here on the other side. Show me that you're dividing by the number in front of the y for each one. And then you make sure you're putting your slope-intercept form over here. You can use Desmos to graph it. Your assignment is going to be to finish the remainder of these guys right here.